Welcome to Human Monsters. And now the conclusion of the Kidwelly sex cult series. Annabelle gave birth to a girl that she named Emily. Surprisingly, her mother was supportive. Colin was not. He would not give her money to buy a pram or a car seat. He required her to give him blowjobs so that he would give her money to buy diapers. Thomas moved into Annabelle's room, and her sister moved into Damien's old room. Colin began raping Annabelle again. One day after a session of rough anal sex, which she hated, he told her she would be getting her first tattoo. He said, "Now that you have a child of the gods, you need to wear a symbol all the time to protect you both. That way, when you get to the palace gates, they will recognize you as the chosen one." The tattoo was of a scarab beetle with outstretched wings. When Colin inspected it afterwards, he said, "Yes, that's good." He turned her arm over to examine it from every angle. He said, "She's done it really well. This is a nice job. Isn't it a nice job?" Annabelle cried, but she forced herself to nod. He said, "You should feel grateful to have such a beautiful symbol of protection on your body forever. That scarab will protect you on earth and in the afterlife, no matter what happens in your path. You have created a child for the gods. You have brought about a renewal of life, of their life, and therefore they owe you that protection. Now they will always know you are the giver of a sacred life." One day after another session of rough sex, he informed her of how her contributions to the church were about to change. "Are you ready to show your devotion to the church, to set yourself on a path to the palace?" She said yes. "I would have sent you to work when you turned 18, but of course you were pregnant, so it wasn't possible. Now that you've recovered, it's time for you to do your duty. There are lots of different jobs you can do. One of them is to go into the film side of things. Another is working in a shop. And then there's the one relating to your quest to become the whore of Babylon. This third one, of course, would be the most relevant to your path, since it would draw you closer to the highest spiritual level needed to become the Scarlet Woman. It is, I believe, your destiny. But you have to prove it to me, to yourself. The joys of love will redeem you from all pain. Follow the ordeals of knowledge. The prophet shall reveal unimaginable joys on earth. And to his woman, the Scarlet Woman, all power shall be given. Do you understand?" The truth was, she neither understood nor cared about what he was saying. He was just like an annoying song on the radio when you can't turn it off because it's in a public address system in a retail setting. She never wanted him around, and his voice was her least favorite sound in the world, but she had no choice but to endure him, so she put up with it. He went on, "Success is your proof, courage your armor. Let the Scarlet Woman raise herself in pride. Let her work the work of wickedness. Let her kill her heart. Let her be loud and adulterous, whether it be shameless before all men. This is your path, Annabelle. You must inhabit the Scarlet Woman. Show your power." One day Colin came into Annabelle's house and said, "Well, my little whore of Babylon, Today's the day. You'll be going to Bristol today with Orla. Be ready at 4 p.m. and take the stuff you bought last week. Your mom will explain everything when you get there. The merchandise he was referring to was lingerie and stiletto heels. She said, "Who's going to look after Emily?" "I am. It'll be fun, won't it, little one?" Annabelle was uneasy about the prospect of Colin looking after Emily alone. He only considered his own needs to be important. Of the trip to Bristol, she said, "How long will I be gone?" "Never you mind. You just concentrate on working hard for the church, and don't disappoint me." When the time came for Annabelle to depart for Bristol, both she and Emily were devastated about their separation. Colin felt no sympathy, as usual. He just barked at Annabelle to leave when her ride arrived. At the destination in Bristol, a place called Paradise Lounge, Annabelle found herself surrounded by scantily clad women in a house decorated in garish colors. One of the women was her mother. Annabelle was handed several condoms. Her mother told her to sit next to her on a bed. She gave her a preamble. It's like this. Your name here is Camilla. When a punter arrives, you go out to the front and introduce yourself as Camilla, and everyone else introduces themselves, and then the bloke picks someone. They pay £60. That's £30 for you and £30 for the house. And you take them up to the room. It's £60 for half an hour. For that, they get a blowjob with a condom and sex with a condom. And once they come, it stops. Annabelle began to have a panic attack upon the realization that strangers went to that house to have sex with her. Her mother had more. Once they're in the room, they can pay to have extras. It's £20 for kissing, £20 for oral sex, and £50 for a blowjob without a condom. After each time, you've got to text Colin. Just say hello and add either one kiss or two or whatever, depending on how many extras they've had. You got it? Annabelle nodded. Her mother said, "Good, because we haven't got long. Doors will be opening soon, and you've got to get ready." One John chose Annabelle, and they made some small talk while she gave him a massage. He told her he could tell she didn't belong in a place like that. It was the kind of thing she needed to hear because Colin and the church didn't seem to believe it. She didn't have the same kind of dialogue with the other 7 men she serviced that night. Days after Annabelle was brought to the Paradise Lounge, she was taken back home. When she arrived, she found that Emily was not there. Her mother told her she was at Colin's house. When she went to his house, she found her screaming her head off whilst in a cot. There were bruises and marks on her face and neck. Her diaper was so full it was nearly bursting. Annabelle couldn't hear anybody in the house. When she brought her back home, she found that her buttocks were red and sore from the neglect. Annabelle was a full-time mother during the week, but a prostitute from Friday to Sunday. Colin told her she needed to be a whore of Babylon in order to qualify to be the Scarlet Woman. The numbers of men she had to have sex with were listed in the book of the law: 318, 618, and finally 918. This was to be done to achieve the highest spiritual level. 1,854 men in total. She had to give Colin all the money she made, and he mostly spent it on himself and his home. She still had to give him a blowjob so he would give her money to buy diapers. He bought Hope a car when she passed her driving exam. Annabelle resented this. She got fucked by hundreds of men so Hope could have a car. One day Annabelle confronted Colin about this, and he said the money was going straight to the church. Annabelle said, "I thought you were the church." No. The church has an international headquarters. That's where all the money goes. It's in a small town in France. You wouldn't have heard of it. And besides, the precise location is governed under church secrecy. Needless to say, they are very happy with you. Annabelle was seriously doubting the things he said at that point. Was it really about her path to the palace, or was it about the money? As time went on, Colin's demands of her as a prostitute increased. He recommended she become an, quote, all-around whore, end quote, and do things like have anal sex and sex without a condom. When she pointed out that she could end up catching an STD, Colin said the gods would protect her from it. An interesting trend was that so many of her clients told her she didn't belong there. Just like the first, a man named Mike. He eventually became one of her regulars. When she switched to a different brothel, he tracked her down and continued to see her regularly. It got to the point where they developed a friendship. He tried to persuade her to leave that life with him. She couldn't bring herself to tell him about the church, but she did mention Emily. Mike said, "She can come too. You've got to get out of here. This isn't the place for a girl like you. You are worth so much more and have so much to offer. I know you don't like it here. I know you don't want to be doing this. Let me support you for the rest of your beauty course until you are ready to become independent. This is no way to start your life. This is no way to raise a child. Please let me help you." She declined, but it did get her thinking. Meanwhile, after servicing her tricks all weekend, she still had to be Colin's sex slave during the week. The only positive change in his behavior was that Annabelle no longer had to beg or perform sex acts for baby needs. Meanwhile, Emily came to regard Orla as her mother. Emily began to crawl and stand while Annabelle was away. Annabelle was missing key milestones of Emily's life, and she was devastated. One night, a client wanted a threesome with Annabelle and her mother. Annabelle found it intolerable, and it was then she decided she needed to escape that life. Her mother had exceeded her quota, but was still turning tricks after becoming the Scarlet Woman, so it was clear Colin would not allow Annabelle to retire anytime soon. Annabelle also did not like neglecting Emily. She began to devise a plan to get out of that life. Annabelle began building up a fund for her escape by stashing some of the cash she made at the brothel every week. She discussed her plan with Thomas, who was also disillusioned and frustrated with the church, and Colin. He worked hard at a supermarket and didn't get to keep any of the money, always handing it over to Colin. Thomas wanted to buy things for Emily. Annabelle got him to contact her mother's old boyfriend, Alan, on Facebook. Alan agreed to put them up for as long as it would take to get them on their feet. Her mother began leaving for the brothel on Thursdays, so Annabelle came up with the idea that she would leave soon after her mother left, and Thomas would tell Colin that she simply disappeared overnight, and he knew nothing of her whereabouts. With Alan's help, Annabelle managed to sneak off in the middle of the night and return to London. There she and Emily stayed with an aunt and her husband. Having been so relieved to have broken from the hold Colin had over her life, she went wild and drank heavily. She also used cocaine and had some casual sex. Eventually, her aunt told her she would not be welcome in her home if her behavior did not improve. Annabelle cleaned up her act. Eventually, she got her own apartment in London. Thomas moved in, looking forward to starting a legitimate family life. At one point, he and Annabelle failed to get along, and he moved back to Kidwelly, where he rejoined the church. DNA testing would later confirm that Colin was the father of Annabelle's baby. Annabelle reported the cult to the London police, and after an investigation, Colin and other members were arrested. In court, Colin, Annabelle's mother, Jackie, Colin's wife, Elaine, and a member named Shelley were found guilty of the following charges. Colin was found guilty of 35 separate crimes, 11 rapes, causing prostitution and indecency with children. Jackie was found guilty of 5 crimes, including aiding and abetting rape, causing prostitution, and indecency with children. Elaine was found guilty of 5 charges of indecency with children. Shelley was convicted of 2 such charges. Annabelle attended the sentencing hearing. Her mother took a look at the attendees in the public gallery. After spotting Annabelle, she turned to Colin and said, sneering, "Oh, look who's here." That was the moment it was confirmed to Annabelle that her mother didn't love her, took Colin's side, and was pure evil. Colin was sentenced to 22 years, with no possibility of parole before 11 served. The judge said to him, "You may never be released. You set yourself up as ruler in your own sick little kingdom, where 3 women danced as your willing attendants. You became their master and formed a community within a community involving child abuse, rape, and prostitution. You have been described as evil. That, in my view, is an entirely accurate statement of your character. It is clear that you have dedicated your life since you were 12 years old to satisfying your sexual urges by whatever means at your disposal. The age or sex of your victims was largely a matter of indifference to you. You treated one victim as nothing more than a sexual plaything, dominating and controlling her life, and you persuaded your wife to join in. What happened has besmirched the unsuspecting town of Kidwelly. You are, for the foreseeable future, a danger to children. This has been your life's work, involving multiple offenses over many years. The public needs protection from you. There are very serious concerns and risks in the future if you are released. You have fully lived up to the ideals of your mentor, Aleister Crowley. You used the occult to further your sexual excess as children were kept as toys for sex purposes. You took a cruel delight in initiating children into sex, but their lives have been blighted forever. It was organized and systematic abuse of children, and you dedicated yourself to such depravity. The judge said to Jackie, "You were clearly besotted with him and this book of the law, and I view you effectively as his second in command." Jackie was sentenced to 12 years. Elaine received 8 years. Shelley got 5 years. Annabelle met a young man through a coworker, and they went on to fall in love and have a son. The church began its activities in London before relocating to Kidwelly. They operated for decades, with the exploitation and abuse of children occurring for just as long. Annabelle may have not had the worst possible experience. Other child victims were initiated as part of an occult ceremony, which ended with them being raped by an adult. They were threatened with murder if they did not submit. One girl said she was routinely raped by Colin Batley at his house and passed around at satanic orgies where she was raped by strangers. She said of this, "I did it because I was told to by Colin." Another victim said, "Colin knew how to manipulate you, to make you believe anything he said." Like Annabelle, those girls worried about the consequences of refusing to cooperate with Batley sexually, fearing, as they did, that they would disappoint and incur the wrath of the gods. A neighbor of Batley's, John Wheatland, once said that a girl in her early teens who lived in Batley's house, or at least visited it on a regular basis, approached him and asked him if he wanted sex. The same man said he heard a victim crying every night. Like Annabelle Forrest, many of the victims were raped by Colin Batley for the first time when they were 11 or 12 years old. The following is an account by Sarah Edmondson, who is a former member of Nxivm, a well-known cult. Gratitude to Insider for making this available.
My name is Sarah Edmondson. I spent 12 years inside Nxivm, one of America's most notorious cults. This is how crime works. It's hard to know what I would have done with my life if I had spent my 30s building a legitimate company and not working for a narcissistic conman, a sociopath, a sex addict who was pretending to help people with their goals. Other people might look at my experience and say, I would never fall for that. I would never fall for Nxivm, and that's so obvious. But anyone can fall for something. I first heard about Nxivm when I was 26. I had been an actress. I'd been living in Vancouver, and I was feeling like my career wasn't as meaningful and purposeful as I was hoping. At the time, I saw people around me doing wonderfully and succeeding, and I was not in the place that I thought I would be by my mid-20s. My boyfriend at the time was a filmmaker, and his film had been accepted into a film festival where I met the director of a film called What the Bleep Do We Know, Mark Vicente. And he said, well, if you like my film, you'll love this workshop that I just took. And he introduced me to this program, Nxivm. Nxivm is the umbrella for a number of different organizations. Executive Success Program was one of them. There were lots of very intelligent, strong, successful people in their field who joined Nxivm. Heads of state, entrepreneurs, actors, but everybody has what we call situational vulnerabilities. The program was a mixture of personal and professional development. It was more the promise of the community and doing something more meaningful and purposeful. I was a big personal growth junkie. My parents are both therapists. So I was totally open to this concept of personal development and growth. And I've been raised with the idea that you can make a difference and you can leave the world better. And this seemed like the way to do it. What we thought we were doing in Nxivm was looking at those belief systems so that we could evolve and become the people that we want to be. It was very easy for me to preach about it. I say preach now because I feel like looking back, I was very evangelical about it. I found the path, I found the way, and the results of the work on me were palpable. I started to book more. I had a lead role in a film that was at the Toronto Film Festival. So people around me thought, the proof was in the pudding. Unfortunately, I saw many red flags. I just had no idea what I was looking at. I was introduced to Keith Raniere as the most ethical, humanitarian, and one of the top 3 problem solvers in the world when I met him. I thought he'd created this curriculum that was groundbreaking and was going to change the personal development space, and he had invented something nothing short of a miracle. That's what I thought. After every class, we'd say, "Thank you, Vanguard," like bowing to somebody in the room that's not even there. So by the time anyone met him, they'd already have an immense amount of respect for him. I thought that if this man created this curriculum that changed my life was in front of me, I'd be, honored to meet him. Like I was meeting somebody, like, meeting the Dalai Lama or something. It was very, I was very reverent of him. And I was. And I was at the same time, I was underwhelmed by his appearance. He had like this scraggly sort of Jesus hair and was very unassuming, very sort of normal nerd vibe. He was definitely kind of sheltered. He'd come out every now and then. It would be like this hush and this in the rush in a space where like, oh, Keith is coming, Vanguard's coming. He was charismatic in that he was very good at holding space for a room. He was very articulate, although he did use a lot of what I now know as word salad, where he would pontificate and tell, share sort of truth of the world that would resonate very deeply, and then go off on other tangents that I'd kind of miss and think, well, did I miss that? I didn't quite understand that, but everyone else is smiling and nodding. So I think, oh yeah, I'm going to smile and nod too, because I must have missed that one. And that was definitely part of his sort of mystique, is this highbrow intelligence. You always wanted to keep up and understand and learn and glean from him. I thought he was celibate. When I met him and was introduced to him, and the way that people spoke about him is that he was a renunciate, so he had no personal possessions. He didn't own anything. He didn't own a car. He didn't own his home, because he's so evolved. He's like a spiritual leader. He's a monk. He doesn't need possessions. He doesn't need sex. He's a renunciate, celibate, evolved man. I found out many years later that he was actually a con man, a sociopath, a narcissist, a sex addict. That was a front for Keith to have a pipeline of basically fresh women for his sexual gratification. I never got too close to him. There was always something that I didn't feel good around him. But I thought that was my limitation at the time. The name Nxivm, we were told at the time it was a made-up word that he created that was like a merging of Greek and Latin, something to do with like a gathering space. But later we found out that Nxivm was from the root Nxivm, which had to do with debt bondage and slavery. I'd say the main tenets of all of the companies within Nxivm was, 1, personal responsibility. In other words, I cause everything in my life. Again, really helpful to own your life and your effects. But the downside of that is that if I say, hey, I don't like this thing that happened to me, it can always be flipped back in your face. And then the abuser won't take responsibility. The packaging of Nxivm at the time was called Executive Success Programs. ESP itself was the idea that you could evolve yourself and your limiting beliefs and become the person that you want to be with this tool set that apparently only this group had. And it was cutting edge technology in the space, in personal development. This first training was actually 5 days, and it was just over $2,000 at the time. We're looking at belief systems. We're also learning basic life skills, time management, good communication, learning how to build your self-esteem, understanding how to interact in business dealings, scripting for asking for what you want in a way that is direct and honest and integrous. So there's a mixture of both business and professional. The setup for most of the executive success trainings and the 8 different programs under Nxivm was what was called inductive learning, or what we thought was inductive learning. Nobody was just talking at us. The setup was normally we'd be in a small circle, we'd be answering questions about different topics, and then there'd be a video on the screen, and Nancy Salzman, Keith Raniere's right-hand woman, she would be explaining the concepts, and then we would go, Oh, I see. That's what it is. And then there'd be another round of discussion and then a breakout group and then a debrief. Sometimes there were forums. Keith would do a forum where he would answer questions. In the initial signing of the application, there was a lot of pressure, a lot of what we call scarcity mentality, like this is your only opportunity and this might not come back your way again. And I had a bit of FOMO and I didn't want to miss out. So that pressure that I felt to sign up right at the beginning was the very first red flag. The head trainers very systematically and succinctly shared that we are here. I committed to my growth. I would paid money to grow, and that any growth would be uncomfortable, which is true. So they said, if you feel uncomfortable and you have the urge to bolt, we ask that you stay in the room and talk to one of the coaches and not leave. In one of the early trainings, there was a game called Rating and Ranking where we had to, in a circle, before we even answered the questions, put everybody in categories of most to least. I think it was attractive, honest, intelligent. I had many, many instances when I wanted to leave, but I also knew that I couldn't get my money back. And I wanted to please Mark and show him that I was, strong enough to get through this. It can take as little as 3 days to indoctrinate somebody into a new belief system if they're open and there's enough repetition, which is what happened. I think that if anyone were to spend 10 to 12 hours a day with a therapist for 5 days, you'd work through a lot of stuff personally. And so I did. I looked at different aspects of my life and what was working and not working. It's almost like I cleared away the cobwebs or, lifted up a veil. And when I left, I could see clearly. I understood myself better. I understood other people better. So one of the things that we were quite proud of at the time in Nxivm is that we believed that the personal development or even the therapy world was not measurable. There's no way to tell, are you growing? Are you successful? So we thought that we had this martial arts system of growth and development, and that when you join Nxivm, you'd get a sash, just like you get a belt in karate. I got to green sash, something I was very proud of at the time because I believe there were somewhere between 12 and 14 when I left out of the whole company. I was part of a circle of friends, mostly actors, a little women's group that I actually helped coordinate. And I just came back to that group and I said, I found the answers. I found the thing that we've all been looking for to take our careers to the next level and work through all the stuff in our personal lives that were stopping us from being optimal. I felt like I had the map to success, a secret handbook that nobody else had. At that point, I'd sunk thousands of dollars in, and that number crept up over the years to way over $100,000. People paid anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000 for trainings, and I don't know what the most anyone's ever spent, but hundreds of thousands of dollars on curriculum. And really where Nxivm managed to expand is they tapped into certain echelons, specifically the political elite in Mexico who were very well off. People paid to take trainings, and then that payment would go to the people running the trainings, the people producing the trainings, but the bulk of it went to the organization itself. And depending on where you were in that hierarchy, you'd get none of the money or a lot of the money. And of course, that was always met with the feedback from the upper ranks saying, well, you just need to work through your issues so you can get to the next level, which would be where you get paid. I was one of the people that did get to that level, and then they would use people like me as poster, like I was really a poster child for those other people. Like, look, if Sarah can do it, then anyone can do it. So the headquarters for Nxivm, the mothership, was in Albany, New York. Mark and I opened the first Canadian center in Vancouver in 2009. There were centers in Mexico City, Monterrey, Guadalajara, Leon. I used a lot of my own personal money to keep it going because the percentage that the company gave you to run the center wasn't nearly enough to even pay rent. And it's a similar structure to what I see in a lot of organizations, especially MLMs, multi-level marketing, which is built on this idea of what I call, it's actually a chapter in my book, the illusion of hope. I always felt frustrated with the growth of the company. There was always things that didn't make sense, like why don't we have a new website? I had an opportunity to bring the curriculum into Lululemon. Lululemon was using Landmark as their curriculum at the time. They wanted a new curriculum. I had heard that, and I got a meeting with Nancy and the people that were, choosing which curriculum to use. And they were like, great, let's do this. And basically Keith said, we have to come to Albany and take a 16-day training. And they were like, Can you come to Vancouver or the Lululemon, you know? And so like, if I didn't know any better, he was sabotaging things. This is an opportunity to bring Nxivm, ESP, Executive Success Programs, to Lululemon. Why wouldn't we do that? And I found out later it's because he knew that it was under scrutiny by such a high-level company. They would see through the facade that he was a charlatan. So he could only have it grow so much. He just wanted it to grow so much so he could have a certain amount of money and a certain number of, fresh, young women at his disposal. I see now that it was 100% a pyramid scheme, in that it was a pyramid. There's somebody at the top and people below them, and the scheme was the lie. The lie is, join this curriculum and you'll reach your success, reach your goals, have everything you ever wanted. But it was, again, the illusion of hope dangled as a carrot to lure people in. We don't know for sure, but somewhere between 17,000 to 20,000 people went through Nxivm. I don't have an exact number of how many people came through the Vancouver Center, but at any given time, our membership was 100 to 200. It was all word of mouth. It was all direct connections. We didn't advertise at all. How I was trained to spot people that I want to bring in is to go to a workshop or to go to an event and look for bright lights, people who were leaders, people who were already shining and wanting to do big things in the world, and bring them into our little group. People were used in different ways, including the Dalai Lama. Like we used to say the Dalai Lama endorsed Keith's book. I will say that anyone is susceptible at the right place at the right time. Other people might look at my experience and say, I would never fall for that. I would never fall for Nxivm, and that's so obvious. It's very obvious to me now. And that's fine. Maybe you never would. But everyone is susceptible to a con or to be lied to or brought into something that is a lie. And it's just really about the right place at the right time and the right trusted person. I got married to Nippy Ames, and we had our baby in 2014. I've been there for 9 years, and all of a sudden, I'm a mother, and my values priority shifted. My internal commitment was starting to fall apart. The years leading up to that, it was falling apart, but I was still so attached, and I really wanted to make this work that I couldn't see it. In the same way a lot of people greatly revered and put Keith on a pedestal, I probably did that more with his second in command, Nancy, and Nancy's daughter, Lauren. Lauren was the head of education. She was only a year older than me, so I really resonated with her and see myself in her in terms of I wanted to be like her. She was a head trainer. She was very intelligent. I loved when she trained a curriculum because I knew that my friends, if they saw her on stage, would be like, this is it. I want to do this, because she was so relatable and so funny and stylish. So she's somebody who I really connected with probably the most in the whole program. I was invited into this badass boot camp for women by Lauren Salzman, who's somebody who I loved and respected. She was the godparents of my child at the time. DOS, which is what they called it, Dominus Obsequious Sororium, which I didn't know at the time what it meant. Now we know it means something about master over slave women. So just like with Nxivm, we thought it was this beautiful personal and professional development community, and it was actually a front for Keith to have a harem of women that he was coercing and controlling. But what we were told it was this group of women, like a sorority, who were going to hold each other accountable to their highest goals and their ideals. And so when she invited me to this thing that would take my growth to the next level, and I had already committed to doing whatever it took to go to the next level, it was an easy yes. And then there was another element of it that was sort of exciting. Nobody knew about it. It was secret. There was a secret girls club. I knew that other women were in it, but nobody knew who was in it. And it was sort of hush, hush, hush. That part was fun. But I also knew that I was going to get a tattoo and be a part of this, get an initiation and meet my sisters eventually. When I was first invited, I felt very uncomfortable. And of course, the response was, well, that's how you should feel. You want everything to be on the line so that you do what you say you're going to do and be committed to your goals. I had to give collateral, which is the Nxivm word for blackmail. So it was something that I was putting down as my word for secrecy. This had already been introduced in Nxivm years before, so that was kind of normal for me. I had known that other women had given much more damaging collateral, including sexual videos and very personal confessions, some of them true, some of them untrue. And now we know it's also like a lot of what they collected was for Keith's pleasure. So I had to give her a letter of confessions of bad things I did when I was in my 20s. And then she took a picture of it and sent it to someone. I assumed it was a woman. And I was told it wasn't bad enough and I had to do another one. And that was the collateral that she held for me to then hear what this group was. She was going to be my master and I'd be her slave. In my mind, I'm like, I live in Vancouver. She lives in Albany. I'm not really going to be her slave. This is a game. But ultimately, I was taking a vow of obedience to her. I had to be on call. All of us had to have our phones on all the time. We had to be available to respond to our masters at any moment, even when we were sleeping. You couldn't be unavailable unless you were, in an elevator or in the ocean or something like that. Even when you were in the air, you were supposed to try to get Wi-Fi and let people know if you couldn't. It's so crazy. We had to respond within a certain time frame, and we found out once because we failed a drill, and we were told that someone could get locked up if we failed again. As soon as I'd committed to this thing, I had a pit in my stomach and felt like it was off, and was trying to figure out how to get out of it from the beginning. There was a number of things that kind of made me realize this is not a women's group. This is for Keith. Ultimately, what woke me up is attending this ceremony, which is still to this day triggering to talk about, to walk people through. I flash back off into the moment of it and wonder how I got through it. It was unbelievably painful. Even when I gave birth, I had epidurals. And before the epidural, it was excruciating pain, but nothing was as painful as this. So imagine a Brandon that basically sliced the skin open slowly and created this design. What I now know is designed on purpose to create a trauma bond with my sisters and have us feel like we're part of this special thing and that we wouldn't tell anybody, also because there's a level of embarrassment and shame. One of the reasons why cults like this go on to exist is because if people have the luxury of waking up and getting out, they don't want to tell anybody because they participated, and it's embarrassing. That night, when I was still indoctrinated and believing I was doing something in that world, I was doing something, this is part of the Nxivm rhetoric, painful to prove my commitment and to develop character. I would prove my strength and my worth to myself, and then I could do anything. And I felt that way. I actually felt really proud of myself. Once I was fully in, then it was revealed that I would have to hand over new collateral every month. Now, this was a lifetime commitment I was making. So I'm thinking to myself, I've got to do this every month. I got a bit more and more collateralized, more and more opportunity to be blackmailed for the rest of my life. What I found out shortly after leaving is that that's basically what Keith was doing with women from even before he started Nxivm. He would bind them into some sort of obligatory relationship where he would have something over them. DOS was the first time it became systematized. So once I was fully collateralized, I was told that I had to give collateral every month and that I also had to recruit my own slaves. Something that I didn't really want to do because I wasn't in myself. I was fully in with Nxivm, but this was I don't even know what this is. On one side of my brain, I'm thinking, how am I going to get out of here? This is crazy. People think we're a cult. This is insane. And then the other part of me going, well, you're a green sash and you're committed to this, and the other women here are lower rank, and you gotta suck it up and be strong and be a leader to them because you committed. And my relationship with Lauren became very strained at this time because it was very much a similar dynamic of an abusive relationship, which now I know is what Keith was doing to her. And it wasn't actually the night of the branding that woke me up and snapped me out of it. It was weeks later when I realized that the symbol on my body, that symbol, when you look in the mirror and you turn your head to the side, was Keith's initials. I was trying to figure out how to get out because I didn't want to give collateral for the rest of my life, nor recruit a bunch of slaves into something that I didn't fully believe in yet. And meanwhile, a lot of things were happening that were huge red flags, and specifically two of his closest friends from the beginning, Pam Kafritz and Barb Jeske, the purple sashes, the two purple sashes, the highest rank other than Nancy and Keith, died of cancer. The funerals were very strange because they were very showy and more like a wedding than a funeral. And I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, but I was very uncomfortable, especially when Pam died, because also he presented her as like his life partner. And at the same time, Mark Vicente, who had brought me in, was my business partner and helped me open the center. He was leaving. He wouldn't tell me why he was leaving unless I signed an NDA. Under that NDA, he told me what he knew, which was not the whole picture because he didn't know about the branding, but what he did know is that women were part of a secret group and they were getting assignments. Some of the women had the assignment to go seduce Keith and that sex was involved. I knew about the branding because I'd been branded, and I somehow felt safe under his NDA to tell him what I knew. And together we had the first time we had a fully honest conversation about everything that we had seen and experienced. And with that, we were able to piece together what we actually now know as the true nature of DOS, which is like a blackmail pyramid scheme with sex. And I believe that's what Keith's plan was for me. All of a sudden, all the things that had ever been said about Keith in the media, from my friends and family, were all just suddenly glaringly true. And I woke up like that. It was not a slow thing anymore. It was just instant. The rug got pulled out from under me and my reality got flipped upside down. Now I'm no longer this recruiter for a personal development group. I'm like part of this nefarious sex cult. And what are we going to do now? And that was a very, very scary time because I didn't know who was in it. I didn't know how deep it was. I didn't know how much collateral people had. All I knew was that I had to get out. And Mark and Nippy and I and a few others, Mark's wife Bonnie, we just strategized very quickly how to get out and how to do it without them coming after us, which of course they did because there's a playbook. Silence defectors. We ended up having a whole strategy about how to basically cause a scene so that people would start to understand what was going on, but also step away in a way that they felt like that we wouldn't be a threat. Because Nxivm didn't go after people who left. They went after people who left and said negative things. Mark Vicente had set up a meeting for me at the FBI office, and I told him everything I knew, and then crickets. I had this image of them like storming the center and stopping the next round of branding, which was supposed to happen that week. But yeah, I went to them and they didn't do anything. And so then we decided to go to the press, and then the New York Times article came out in the fall of 2017. And that's really when the proverbial hit the fan. I mean, this was probably the most traumatic, scary time of my life. I wasn't sure if I was going to be followed, if they were going to come after me. They did. One of the leaders came to Vancouver and tried to get the Vancouver police to arrest me on a bunch of charges that they basically made up. Fraud, mischief, and theft. Apparently, it was that article that got Moira Penza, my prosecutor hero in New York, to say, hey, we got to do something about this. And her and her team in the FBI acted very quickly to extradite Keith, who was hiding in Mexico like a little coward, and deport him and hold a trial and have an incredible legal stance that was quite obvious who the bad people were and who the good people were, and put him in jail for 120 years. In that time period where they don't know what I know, I was trying to let people, as many people know the truth. I'm still shocked about what was revealed. Like when we blew the whistle, there's what we knew. And then there was so much more revealed at the trial that was shocking, mind-blowing, incredibly upsetting to know all this was happening while we were involved. One of my dear friends who's married, who is in DOS and having to perform in sex acts with Keith, and just really horrific things that it just shocked me. Like I thought I knew the worst of it, and it was so much more. And specifically with Lauren, what was heartbreaking is that I found out that he'd been promising her a baby. She was in it for the long term. She missed out an opportunity to be a mother because she was waiting for Keith to, grant her that honor to carry his child, which he was promising to many women. The wake of Keith's destruction is unimaginable. And there's probably more that we don't even know about. My understanding is that he was kind of playing the victim, and that he was misunderstood, and I believe his lawyer was always painting him as, maybe unconventional, but always a good man, trying to help people, and that maybe went too far, but he was never trying to hurt anybody. Keith Raniere is convicted of all 7 charges, including sex trafficking conspiracy, wire fraud conspiracy, forced labor conspiracy, and racketeering conspiracy. And the jury only took less than 4 hours to deliberate. It was very clear. When all of this kind of came to light and the vow came out, what I didn't realize is that the vow opened up a world where people in all different religions and cults and abusive relationships, anything there was coercive control or gaslighting, people watched that and saw themselves in it and felt that they were no longer alone, and they felt seen. I had no idea that was going to happen when we did the vow. Like, even when we were filming it, we were documenting it partly for protection, because we had to show what we were doing and we were trying to do the right thing. And I never thought this footage would become an HBO hit during a pandemic and reach people in all over the world and give them hope to get out of the situation they were in some cases avoid a situation. I can't even tell you how many people wrote to me saying, I almost signed up for this thing or joined this thing, and then I saw the vow and I realized what the red flags were. I wrote the book just actually as the trial was underway, and was finishing the book in the middle of the trial. So it's really my story of getting in and my time in Nxivm, and then up until the trial. The book is called Scarred: Escaping Nxivm, the Cult That Bound My Life. We started a podcast called A Little Bit Culty, and we look at things that are a little bit culty and a lot culty and everything in between. Unfortunately, there's thousands of cults. We don't actually know how many specifically, because they keep popping up and they've been under the radar, and they remain under the radar until they're not. Every episode, we're talking to somebody from a different group or religion or organization or field of expertise, and we've come to the conclusion that any group can become culty if they're not already. They may start altruistic and start with great ideals, but with the right, or it's in some cases the wrong person involved or at the helm, they can take a turn. We've also come to the conclusion that everyone is susceptible. Nobody is immune. If you think you are immune, you are the most susceptible. And really, truly, the only actual immunity is from educating yourself. So that's what we try to do now. We actually made an episode specifically for people who have friends and family that are involved in something they are concerned about to be perhaps a bit culty. And the best advice I would say to them is, don't tell them that they're in a cult. Don't put them on the defensive, because it actually reinforces what the group has said to them will happen from people on the outside. You want to give your friends and family a lifeline to the outside world. You want them to feel safe and not judged by you. So if you can just be present with them and loving with them and try to be genuinely curious, like, oh, tell me about this group and what do you do there? And oh, I didn't. Oh, so you don't get paid for the work that you do? For example, just ask questions in a way that maybe the person could start to get back to their critical thinking, because often that's been taken away. And you want them to have someone to call if and when they start to have doubts. The first piece of advice I like to give people is to know that, and this is easier said than done, but that you're already whole and that you're already complete and you don't need any of those things. But oftentimes we feel that need. I'd say if you feel like if something's being sold to you based on an assumption of your neediness, and they're offering the antidote to that, they're offering the answers, and they're dangling a promise of salvation or success, and it's all there. Everything you need is there. That's a huge red flag. Nobody has all the answers. Do your research. If you type in, is blank a cult? Does anything come up on the internet? Are there articles from actual legitimate publications saying that this is problematic from legitimate sources? And what's the company or organization's group response to those allegations? Oftentimes people will say, oh, they're just jilted lovers, or so-and-so went crazy. That's a huge red flag. Where there's smoke, there's fire. So that's my advice to people is forget the word cult. Is this toxic? Is it healthy? Can you leave? Can you be yourself? Do you have your full self in this thing? Or are you cutting off parts of yourself to be accepted and to feel belonging? I didn't do anything for a while because I felt like I needed the brand as proof. People didn't believe it. And I had to show people to say, this happened. And anyone who was in Nxivm who was still indoctrinated would look at it and go, well, what's so bad about it? Or, but didn't you choose it? Didn't you say yes to that? That's when I knew they were gone. Anyone outside of Nxivm would look at me and be horrified. They go, I'm so sorry, Sarah. How did this happen? So a couple of years ago, I had it like completely surgically removed. I'm really glad that his initials are off my body. What's my biggest regret? I try not to have regrets because I don't think that's a healthy way to live. I really love my life now. I love my boys, and I wouldn't have had my boys if I had not met Nippy and Nxivm. Sorry, I'm gonna cry again. I mean, I can't help but wonder what my 30s would have been like had I been a part of a legitimate group, a legitimate company, and built something that was real. But like I said, if I had done that, I wouldn't be a mom to my boys and living in Atlanta and having this adventure. So I think, I don't want to say everything happens for a reason because I don't know if it's that exactly. Obviously, I wish that I had not gotten branded, but it caused me to wake up and be able to be an advocate for survivors and be on this path of cult recovery advocacy. So maybe it was somehow meant to be somehow. I don't know.
Thank you for listening to Human Monsters. Bye for now.